Well, good day, everybody, and welcome to the Neuroscience edition of 5-Minute Psych. In this 5-minute segment, we'll look at techniques to study the brain, and to do this, we'll look at two main types of techniques, those that aim to understand brain structure and those that are focused on brain function. What's the difference? Well, those that have the goal of studying brain structure use fancy imaging techniques to map the boundaries of different regions of the brain without caring about what those areas do functionally. When the goal is to study brain function, now you use imaging and other techniques to see what jobs the different areas do. There are three neuroimaging techniques to study brain structure. The computerized tomography, or CT scan, involves taking multiple X-rays of the brain from many different angles. A computer then constructs a three-dimensional image from all of these different images. Magnetic resonance imaging, or an MRI scan, can provide a very clear picture of the brain by relying on the fact that different areas of the brain are made up of slightly different molecular compositions that respond differently to a magnetic field. Finally, diffusion tensor imaging, or DTI, allows researchers to measure white matter pathways, or tracts, in the brain. Recent research suggests that these white matter pathways may suffer damage in patients with concussions. 4 imaging techniques have also been developed to study how the brain functions, or what jobs the different areas of the brain serve. These techniques vary according to spatial resolution, or how well they can pinpoint the location of a specific brain region's activity, as well as temporal resolution, or how well they can decipher when the activity happens in that region. First, we have electroencephalogram, or EEG. Basically, you have the participant wear a bathing cap of electrodes that each measure the electrical activity of millions of neurons under the scalp and skull. Researchers use this to identify the state of consciousness, such as alert or drowsy, and it's also helpful to diagnose neurological disorders like epilepsy. This technique has very good temporal resolution, but the spatial resolution is quite poor, with each electrode picking up a signal from millions of neurons. A very similar technique is magnetoencephalography, or MEG. Instead of measuring the electrical activity of neurons, like EEG, MEG measures the tiny magnetic fields that is created by the electrical activity of those neurons. So, like EEG, it has good temporal resolution and poor spatial resolution. With functional magnetic resonance imaging, or fMRI, differences in blood oxygen in the brain over time is measured while the person is doing a task, and for this reason, both the spatial and temporal resolution of the fMRI is decent. Finally, we have positron emission tomography, or the PET scan. Here, a harmless radioactive substance is introduced into the participant's bloodstream before they engage in a cognitive task. The scanner can then measure where most of the blood is sent across the brain while they're doing this task, although the participant needs to be actively thinking about the task for about a minute to get a good measure. For this reason, the PET scan has poor temporal resolution, and the spatial resolution isn't the greatest either. Researchers have relied on 4 methods to learn about brain function. With the case study, we can learn about the job of brain areas by looking at how individuals are different after suffering brain injuries to those areas. With lesioning, parts of the brain of animals are removed to learn what those regions are responsible for. We don't do this technique with humans, although we do use electrical stimulation as a way to learn about brain function. This is done during brain surgery. The surgeon may stimulate a region by applying a mild electrical stimulation to the surface of the brain. When this happens, the patient may giggle, turn their head, or do other specific behaviors. Finally, with transcranial magnetic stimulation, or TMS, an electromagnetic pulse is able to temporarily deactivate the region of brain just below a specific part of the scalp, and this is helpful to learn what job this region does. We just looked at 3 imaging techniques to study brain structure, 4 imaging methods to study brain function, and finally we ended with 4 other methods to study brain functions. Now, aren't you glad you had 5 minutes?